Welcome back. Now, we are almost at the end of day 2 of the Latinas Make a Difference Summit. Thank y'all so much for sharing your time with us. Now, being a community organizer is not as easy as it sounds, but it's also not nearly as hard as you might think. If there's a group you've been itching to start, or even a cause that you think the world and our community can benefit from, you're not going to want to sit out this next session, Organizing and Advocacy for the Real World Mujer. I like to think of it as a community organizing for the rest of us. I hope it inspires you to do something extraordinary for yourself, your familia, and of course, always your community.
Hello, familia. Welcome to Latinas Make a Difference Summit 2021 Poder in Action. Today, we're going to be discussing Organizing 1.1, where you will learn about the history of organizing, examples, step to organizing, and how you're already making a difference in the world. So let's begin. What is organizing? Well, there are different reasons and definitions for community organizing. So I'm going to share 2 of them with you. Community organizing is a democratic strategy used by social justice movements, labor unions, underrepresented communities, and marginalized groups to gain rights, win collective power, and create positive change. On a local level, community organizing is a process where people who live in proximity to one another or share some common problem come together into an organization that acts in their shared interests. Something like Poderistas. So tell me, do you all know where community organizing originates from? Well, let me tell you, I had to do some digging, but there are examples of community organizing as early as the 1880s, like the Newsboys' Strike of 1899, which demonstrates an early example of youth organizing. However, the term community organizer wasn't introduced until the 1940s by Saul Alinsky from the Industrial Area Foundation in Chicago. Alinsky wrote Reveal for Radicals, published in 1946, and Rules for Radicals, which is one of my favorite books, published in 1971. With these books, Alinsky was the first person in America to codify key strategies and aims of community organizing. But there are so many more organizers and movements like the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the LGBTQIA movement, and community organizers like Cesar Chavez, President Barack Obama, Dolores Huerta, that used organizing tactics to achieve major change in this country and beyond. And you're also looking at somebody who started her career as a community organizer in the community a long time ago, and then scaled up to go national and international. There are many types of community organizing that many of us have been a part of, from neighborhood organizing to sign a petition, to community organizing, labor organizing to achieve workers' rights like parental leave, weekends off, etc., faith-based organizing, issue organizing where we come together around an issue, feminist organizing, and more. A range of forms of organizing are door knocking, where organizers go door to door and draw individuals into an organization or a campaign. Also coalition building, where people come together around an issue and begin to develop key strategies in order to achieve a goal. Block club organizing, where blocks are organized into a club, or sometimes tenants in a building are organized. House meetings, which were used during the 1960s around the organizing of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. This is a series of house meetings are held in a community, leading to a community congress to form an organization. And also one-on-ones. That is my favorite approach, is making sure that I connect with people, talk to them about what I care about, the different issues that could impact their lives, and bring them in. So by now, you're probably asking yourself, what is the role of a community organizer? A community organizer brings people together, creates unity and solidarity to support a community to solve problems and reach shared goals. The main job responsibilities of a community organizer typically include, but are not limited to, identifying and understanding a vulnerable community, its roots problem, and how the existing social system has created the problems. 2, developing a shared solution and narrative for how to solve the community's problems. 3, crafting an action plan, which may include demands and a strong communication strategy to achieve the desired solution by winning collective power, often through the political system. So I will share with you, when we were marching on January 21st for the Women's March, we created entry points for people to get involved. So we were not necessarily marching against Trump. We said, you know, Trump is just a symptom of what we've seen throughout the country, but let's actually march for something. And so we created a set of demands, which were called our unity principles, that created entry points for people to get involved. And so one was to march for reproductive justice. The second was to march for immigration reform as it applied to women. So we asked all these different people who were working on these issues to look at their issue and allow it to intersect through a gender lens. And so that's what I mean by either creating demands, whether you're a tenant organizer, whether you're organizing around justice reform or police accountability, racial justice, around immigration reform. You could either put together a set of demands, or you could actually create these different unity principles that allow people to understand what are you marching for. As well as when I say a strong communication strategy, it is so important for people to know what you are protesting, why you're organizing, why you're marching, what you are fighting for. And so recently I organized an event in New York City, and it was around the different injustices that were happening. And so as we were bringing people together, we thought it was going to be about 100 of us marching, but it actually was about 35,000 of us. And so everywhere we put our messaging on palm cards, we put together a press release on Twitter, on IG, so everybody knew why they were there. And so we were constantly repeating that information. So number 3 is key. Number 4 is building relationships, bringing people together and educating them on how they can carry out the plan. One of my main things that I talk about all the time in my community organizing or in my organizing strategy is that people need to know that there is a lane for them. So building relationship is key, bringing people into the conversation. So you're always going to need people to do different things. You don't need the cookie cutter person just like you. So if you're a leader, you're going to need somebody, and you're somebody who could communicate strongly, you're going to need a strong writer. You're going to need somebody who's a documentarian. You're going to need somebody who understands how to craft some of the demands. You're going to need somebody who actually knows how to do some door knocking. So always understand that it is important to build relationships with people. Make sure you have those one-on-ones. Bring people together, let people participate, and bring the gifts to the movement and educate them on how they could carry out the plan. Number 5 is keeping the plan moving forward toward its intended goal through trainings, actions, media relations, regenerative support, building solidarity and coalitions, and other movement strategies. Again, this is also important because you want to keep it moving. There are going to be people who are tired. So you always want to make sure that you're training new people, that people understand the messaging, that there are talking points, that the demands are very clear and simplified so that you could put them on t-shirts, that you could put them on palm cards. You also want to make sure that you generate support. Sometimes events cost money. So you're going to need that person who says, look, I can't show up to your event, but how can I support? And you could always say, well, we need financial support, and that's the way in which you could support as well. Building solidarity. And solidarity doesn't mean that I show up for you and I bring all my baggage or my issues into the space. It's actually authentically showing up for somebody. It's saying, I have a gift. I'm here to lend my support, and I'm going to be in solidarity with you. There is a powerful quote by a woman named Leela Watson, who's an Aboriginal woman. She said, if you are here to help me, don't waste your time. But if you are here because my liberation is bound with yours, then let us work with one another. So again, it's showing up in solidarity, not saying, hey, I'm here to save you, but I'm actually here because I'm invested in your liberation, or I'm invested in your cause, or I'm invested in making sure that we get some gains and some wins here. Steps to community organizing. All right. So this is important as well. All of it is important. But know that this is not that difficult and that you could always listen to this over and over and over, or you could personally reach out to me. But number one, it is important to integrate into the community by building relationships. We've already shared that. I was participating in community activities, meetings, having one-on-ones with people. But again, when you integrate into a community, you don't come in by saying, hey, I know everything about you. It's really about listening, right? It's about making sure that you understand what's going on. And first, you got to gather information. Second, identifying problems and work with the community to cut issues out of those problems. There are not always issues that we can identify immediately, but certainly there are problems that people have identified in their community. So for instance, if there are cars that are traveling too fast down your street, you want to say, hey, I want to bring my community members together because I want my kids to feel safe when they're playing outside. And so we want to put maybe, a speed bump in the road. So again, it's not just about saying, okay, this is a problem, but what's the issue, right? How do you organize people around that issue? Set goals and objectives, identify individuals with certain skill sets, and create core groups. You don't need to change the world by having millions of people show up. You could change the world by developing a core group of individuals that will show up every single day to help you achieve your goal. Create an action plan to meet goals, execute and monitor, right? You can't always be everything to everybody else. So you're going to have to make sure that you monitor that things are moving forward, and also make sure that you delegate. Oftentimes, there are not enough people who delegate information, who delegate roles. And so sometimes you feel overwhelmed, or sometimes the action plan gets lost because that one person is holding everything. Evaluate the effect of the action plan on the stated goals. And the last but not least step is ensure you build up leaders throughout the process. You can't organize something and be the only spokesperson. You want to make sure that everybody's leadership is being built up. That is a great example of a community organizer. So to put it simply, right, community organizing consists of 5 different things. 1 is listening to people. 2, clarifying common goals. 3, framing strategies for action. 4, helping build leaders, which is super key to your success. And 5, mobilizing the community. So let me share some examples of community organizing with all of you. You all heard about the great boycott that the United Farmers Workers organized internationally, which was a huge success, as well as the Chicano movement, who organized student walkouts to protest against police brutality. The Black Panther Party, who had their breakfast club and were able to organize around the community to actually feed their children. Acorn did organizing around community enrichment. They did door knocking across communities in the country. Pico National Network organized around faith-based organizing, and Barack Obama's presidential campaign used small dollar donations in order to organize people to participate. Most of us really know community organizing through the promotores de salud, who come into our communities to remind us that we need to take care of ourselves, and so much more. Community organizing is not activism. It's not mobilizing. It's not advocacy. It's not direct services. It's not legal action. It's not community development. So it's not nonpartisan dialogues about community problems. And you say, what do you mean it's not any of those things? Well, community development is actually when you go and you assess a community and you develop it to actually become what you envision it to be. Direct services is when you work for a community-based organization and you provide a service to the community. And advocacy often is associated with different laws, right? And so you're advocating for something to be changed. And so community organizing is about building people together around an issue to make sure that they achieve a goal. So out of all these different things that I've learned throughout my life in organizing, the 20 plus years, I've put together what I call Carmen's 10 organizing commandments. And so one, I want to remind you to ground yourself in an ideology bigger than yourself, whether it's servant leadership or the ideology of Dr. King, which is Kingian nonviolence. This can be used as your foundation to organizing, civic engagement, bringing people together and reminding them that this is bigger than themselves. The second one is to suspend your first judgment and gather more information. How many times have you walked into a community meeting and you looked around the table and you're like, what am I doing with these people? Or you've actually judged somebody before you even knew them. And so what I want to remind you is to always suspend your first judgment, gather more information, because you never know whether it's that person, whether it's that meeting, whether it's that that community organization. There's a place for you in those places. But if you come in with so much judgment, you don't allow yourself to be open to actually build relationships. Number three is meet people where they're at and champion them to your cause. It's not always about working with like-minded people or like-hearted people. It's about actually going to people and reminding them why it's important for them to support your cause. There are so many times that we say, we're not going to work with that person because they don't believe in the same thing I do. It could have been easy to have stepped away from organizing the Women's March, but it was important for me as a Latina to be there and to be a leader in that space and to show other young girls that they could also be there. And so I had to make sure that I met people where they were and I championed them to my cause. I had to talk about very difficult things by using courageous conversations, but I knew that I needed to make sure that I created a lane for us. Also, people aren't going to always know to show up. So touch people 3 times, whether it's by sending them an email, texting them, calling them. Just because people don't show up to your first meeting, don't think it's a total loss, right? Just make sure that you're constantly reaching out to folks. Say, hey, we're going to have you here. Please meet us at this location. But make sure that you keep touching them, that you keep reaching out, because people forget we're all busy. Number 5 is center people who are directly impacted by the issue. Don't center yourself unless you are also impacted by the issue, but always make sure that you bring people to validate what you're working on who can share their personal testimony. So for instance, if I'm fighting for, and many of you know, I fight for justice reform. I don't always talk about my experience with the justice system. I bring people who actually have been impacted negatively by the justice system to share their story. Number 6 is understand there's a lane for everybody. Everybody, even that paletero man that's down the block, there's a lane for him in our community organizing efforts. There's a lane for that abuelita. There's a lane for your niece. There's a lane for everybody. Oftentimes we think that things have to be so prestigious and we fail to include our family members. Actually, our family members are our biggest advocates. So make sure that you remember that there's a lane for somebody, whether it's a DJ, a hip hop artist. They're going to be amplifying your work to communities that you're not connected to. So make sure that you find a lane for people in your cause. One of the things that I tell my team is that you have to facilitate excellence. You are there to be a bridge between those that have access and those that don't. You're also there to help facilitate other people providing their best selves in these meetings. And so stay enthusiastic. Remind yourself, don't underestimate the power of your facilitation. Facilitate the best out of people in these spaces. And also keep a high impact, low ego. Oftentimes in our meetings, we have that stamped right outside the door. If you're entering this room, you're remembering to keep a high impact and a very low ego. Sometimes egos could be very negative. You don't want that to get in the way of what you're trying to achieve in your organizing efforts. And always remember to keep your eyes on the prize. What is your ultimate goal? Again, when we were organizing the Women's March, or when we were organizing different protests, whether it was a 250-mile march, it was so easy to give up. But no, we kept our eyes on the prize. Our prize was to ensure women felt that their rights were not going to be rolled back, and that women's rights were human rights. And so we made sure that we plastered that everywhere, and we kept our eyes on the prize. And number 10, organize, organize, organize. It's so important to always feel like you are contributing to something bigger, and know that that team that you built is going to achieve your goal. So let me share with you some well-known community organizers. I've already talked about Saul Alinsky. I've talked about Fred Ross. There's also John Calkins. There's Mark Anderson. There's Ella Baker, who's one of my favorites. Heather Booth, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, Mother Jones, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., whose ideology I follow, Kingian nonviolence. Huey P. Newton, who went to my university, UC Santa Cruz, and was getting his PhD. Corky Gonzalez, who was the leader of the Chicano movement, Barack Obama, Fannie Lou Hamer, and you are a community organizer, because I have to share with you, it's not about organizing these big events, right? It's about, many of you know how to organize soccer, to get your kids to the soccer event. Many of you know how to organize a party. Many of you know how to organize around a PTA. That is community organizing. So don't ever think that you are not an organizer. You are part of the well-known community organizers. And last but not least, I want to leave you with one of my favorite organizing quotes from my leader, Dolores Huerta, who says, "Every moment is an organizing opportunity. Every person is a potential activist. Every minute is a chance to change the world." And so always remember of your potential. Always remember that whatever you do, which is big or small, you are changing the world little by little by little. Each one teach one. I never knew that Carmen Perez, the little girl from the west side of Oxnard, who was a basketball player, was going to go on to organize the largest single-day protest in the history of this country. But I did, and it was because people like you came into my life and reminded me of my worth. And so I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter what you do, whether it's big or small. Any opportunity you get, every minute that you have is an opportunity to change the world. And so thank you so much for taking this with me. I hope you enjoyed it. Please follow me at MS Lady Justice One. And thank you again. Gracias.
Hi, my name is Nicole Quintero, and I'm excited to share with you my Poderista story. So my Poderista story begins almost 15 years ago. That's how long my career in tech has been. I've had the really good fortune to work for companies like Google and Facebook and some startups in the education space. And I've gone from advertising sales to becoming a software engineer to becoming a product manager. And so I've developed a lot of really great skills, met a lot of great people, but I've always had the nagging sense that I should be doing something more for our community. And I didn't know what that meant exactly. And then I became pregnant, and what was a happy moment was also one that was clouded in fear. And that's because I knew the facts about maternal outcomes and racial disparities, and the fact that because I was Black and Latina, especially in New York City, it meant that there was a greater likelihood of something happening than there should be. And I didn't know how to navigate this fear exactly, but I knew that I needed help. And I was able to, through my network, find someone, a doula, to help me through that experience. I was extremely grateful to have her there, especially because I had a difficult hospital experience. And we became really great friends as she was helping me through this kind of transition into motherhood. And as I was telling her about my career and my life, and kind of wanting to do something and my dreams and desires, she was sharing hers. And it turned out that hers was to build a website that connects birth providers of colors to families like mine. And that was it. That was the aha moment of, hold on, this is what I've been building for. I wasn't sure, where these skills exactly would land me. And I've made career pivots, and turns out that it was all in the name of being able to build this website for her, bring her baby into the world. her idea as she was able to help mine. And so during the pandemic, my doula and I launched our website, the Bridge Directory, to bridge the gap between birth providers of color and families of color like mine that are looking for someone who looks like them. Someone who speaks their language in order to help them in what is a really beautiful but also vulnerable moment in their lives. And so I'm excited that even though I couldn't see the forest for the trees earlier in my career, that it's kind of all come to fruition and that I've been able to, contribute in this world and hopefully bring a lot of good. Thank you.
Is Hispanic progress a pro for America? Some people still question it. But when I see mi gente, all I see are pros. The producers and protectors, the programmers and professors pushing the country forward. That's why P&G is proud to join Hispanic Star to empower our communities, because they see what we see, that our progress will always, always be a pro. Help us power progress at HispanicStar.org.